Hello everyone, this is Ishan, and in this particular video, I'm going to give a few of my comments on the new Be Vocal About Local initiative. Now that the Prime Minister of India has announced to the people and encouraged people to try to buy local produce as much as possible, I felt in this particular video I would shed light a little more on what exactly local produce is and what's the gray area. So how we need to be a bit careful when we try to support our country and we try to support Made in India initiative. So a few steps to follow. I have given a few recommendations. I will talk about a few terminologies as well. And this is all to get our thinking going, because if we really want to support local produce, then there are certain steps to bear in mind, and we need to be alert about a few points as well. So for starters, this is my recommendation in general. Okay, number one, we really need to boost our local manufacturing in all sectors. And the reason I say all sectors is we can't just say that we are going to use Indian toothpaste or Indian soap or Indian washing powder. We need to have a 360 degrees approach. We need to look at agricultural produce, fresh produce. We need to look at the dairy industry, the cottage industry as well. We need to look at the retail and hospitality sector. We need to look at entertainment. And of course, we cannot neglect technology. So if we focus in all these areas, then we are truly supporting our country, and then we are truly contributing to what a Prime Minister has recommended to us. We also need to boost our local consumption of local goods. So try to consume as much as possible locally. So manufacture locally, consume locally as well. Boost the manufacturing of components that are required. You see, I might be producing in India, I might be making in India, I might be an Indian with an Indian company, but to make my product, what if I import goods from China or from other countries? So our focus should not be just on the end product. Our focus should also be on the components that are required to make the product that we are trying to sell. So literally saying from scratch, each and everything that is required should be manufactured locally. So our focus should be on those tiny components as well. You don't want to end up buying a phone that is made in India, owned in India, but everything inside the phone is made in China. Then it defeats the purpose, or it doesn't serve the purpose to its full potential. In doing so, we also need to boost our exports. See, at the moment we are having a trade deficit. Trade deficit is, to keep it in simple terms, it is by how much our imports are more than our exports. And at the moment, our foreign trade deficit is minus $11 billion US dollars, which is pretty significant. We got to bring it in the positive area. Right now, we are in negative. So if we follow these steps, if we follow the initiative of thinking locally and producing locally as well, we might reach that in a couple of years. We also have to ensure that there is enough made locally for local consumers. And I say this because of the example in Australia. There are certain Australian companies who are exporting from Australia. They produce in bulk. However, those goods are now so reliant on exports and for foreign markets that we cannot have access to those goods locally. So we don't want to end in a situation where everything is made in India, exported from India, but not available for Indians. That will be a terrible situation as well. So these are a few points I feel every Indian, whether a consumer, whether a producer, should think about. Also, beware, made in India does not necessarily mean owned by Indians. You see, I could be a foreigner, I could invest in India, I could build a manufacturing plant in India, but all the profits go to my parent company, which could be a foreign company. So just if something is made in India does not necessarily mean it is owned by Indians as well. And another part is, see, if something is owned by an Indian company, let's say I'm an Indian living in India, owning an Indian company, does not necessarily mean that I'm producing in India as well. So we have to look at both the factors. We have to look at the two sides of the coin. Who is the owner? Where is the owner? Where is the profit going to? And where is the production happening? And for that reason, here are a few terms. So I'm going to focus on terminology. The reason I'm giving Australian examples is because I'm in Australia right now, and I can easily access this. People who are in India at the moment, you can try to compare this with Indian examples. So what happens in Australia is, for most of our products, we have these labels. It's compulsory compulsory. So everything we buy here, okay, has a label that either says grown in Australia, it either says made in Australia, product of Australia, or packed in Australia. So I'm quickly going to go through these 4 examples, and I feel these kind of labels will give a better clarity to people who want to make their buying decisions, who want to make their purchasing decisions. For instance, here we have a label that says grown in Australia. It means, this is usually seen for eggs, for instance, of some grains as well. It means a carton of eggs that is labeled as grown in Australia means the chickens are grown in Australia. Okay, now it doesn't tell where the farmer is from. I could be a farmer from Norway who has a Norwegian company, and I could have a farm in Australia where I'm growing Australian grown chicken, and then they are giving Australian grown eggs. See, grown means it's grown in that country, does not talk about the ownership. So this is for us. See, this is just awareness, okay? What I'm trying to say is better the awareness, better our decisions would be. The next terminology is made in Australia. Now, usually it has a bar on the left side that, you can see the indicator. It says made in Australia from at least 80 Australian ingredients. So what it means in this case is the loaf of bread that is labeled as made in Australia has at least 80% Australian ingredients, but the bread was baked in Australia as well, but doesn't tell about the remaining 20%. Maybe the remaining 20% ingredients came from China. Who knows? So just saying made in India is not enough. We need to break it down to how much of that made in India is from India. How many of the ingredients are coming from India as well? The next one is product of Australia. I love this one because if something says it's a product of Australia, it means the product is made from scratch using only Australian ingredients. So made in Australia, from Australian ingredients, everything, packaging, ingredients, color, advertising, everything in Australia. The only problem is when it says product of Australia, once again, it does not tell about the ownership. And I'll be very frank, the reason why many companies refrain from talking about the ownership is because, well, the ownership could be from anywhere. And nowadays we have mergers, acquisitions, we have joint ventures. The parent company could be from a foreign country. The subsidiary could be from your local country. It gets very complex, If you're listed on the stock exchange as well, who knows who owns 10% of your company, who owns 20% of your company. Maybe the major shareholder is from India, but the minor shareholders are maybe from another country. So it gets difficult, to really understand who is the owner and whom we really want to support. So these labels, grown in Australia, or we can make it grown in India, or made in Australia from a percentage of Australian ingredients, we can replace that as made in India from at least 80% Indian ingredients, or maybe 100%. Instead of product of Australia, we could have a label in India that says product of India. That would tell the consumer very clearly what they are buying, and it will help us. I'm not saying everyone should have just one vision. Different people could have a different vision. Different people may want to have a different style of support towards Indian produce. So they can make an educated choice. The last terminology that I like to talk about is packed in Australia from at least 20% Australian ingredients. So for example, a pack of mixed nuts that is labeled packed in Australia from 20% ingredients means minimum of 20% of the nuts are grown in Australia. So this will be useful for us as well, for the junk food or maybe for the dry fruit industry. If a package has an Indian label, it's an Indian company, but what if the nuts inside are not 100% Indian? And this is the reality. If we buy a packet of nuts, it does not necessarily mean everything in the packet you're buying is from one producer. See, I could be the company who is processing or who is selling, the finished product of peanuts. But I could have a tie-up with 10 different farmers. Maybe 3 of my farmers are in India. 2 of my farmers are in China. 1 of my farmer is in maybe Pakistan. Who knows? India does have trade with Pakistan for dry fruits a lot. You can check that out with the economic indicators. So the point is, I would collect all those nuts. I would mix them. I would get them together, and then I would package them and sell it to you. You don't know when you open your pack which nut is from India, which one is from China, which one is from Pakistan. cannot tell. Okay, so that's why such packaging, such instructions make it easier for the consumer to know whether it's packed in India, and then how much of what you're eating is 100% Indian, or how much of it is from another country. So this will actually help us to understand what we are consuming. So my conclusion, guys, for the vocal about local, I think it is fabulous. I just think we could help the consumers more, and I think the consumers could be a bit more alert as well. So just if they're supporting Godrej, or if they're supporting Tata, it does not automatically mean you're joining the bandwagon. You need to be more aware and more alert. So my conclusion is to focus on what the label says. Read the label. That's it. Pick the item, look at the back, check where the company, or who the owner is, Google the owner's name, check the tie-up, check the joint venture, check who has what stake in the company. Everything will be available on Google. Okay, then look for packaging. Where is it packed? Where is the ingredient coming from? Where is it produced? Try to get maximum information and make a rational decision. Okay, once again, like I said, Googling the ownership of the company is good, but we won't get 100% information, because unless we have access to certain documents, it's difficult to know, or it's very time consuming to know who is on the board and who has how much stake in the company, and where is the owner, where are the profits going. See, at the moment, let's focus on Indian made as much as possible. Slowly, let's progress to Indian ownership companies as well, because see, it's not just about making in India. What also matters is where are the profits going. Okay, if we are making in India but the profits are going overseas, that's not really helping as much as we want. So consuming locally as much as possible is good. Trying to support local manufacturing in all sectors, like I said before, not just one particular soap or your clothes, but electronic items, even the shopping centers. Try to visit the shopping centers that are owned locally, that are owned by India, that don't have foreign investment in them or foreign owners. Also, try to, now this is from the government perspective, but when we are looking at make in India or invest in India, try to ensure that those foreign companies are not just making in India, but they are actually giving back to India as well. So what I mean is, when foreign companies set up in India, the usual argument, okay, the common argument is they create jobs. Okay, if a big multinational opens up a huge manufacturing plant in a barren land in India, let's say, it will create a lot of jobs because a lot of local youth will get employment. We shouldn't be happy just with that part. Our question should be, are our Indians getting positions in the top senior management level? And what kind of technology, what kind of knowledge and skills is that company giving back to India? So we don't want them to just make plants in India, get labor, produce everything, get it out of the country, profits go out of the country as well. We want them to give back to India, and that can be in the form of knowledge and skills. If someone is setting up a plant in India, our youth, our laborers, our labor, okay, or our working class, we should have access to upskilling ourselves, learning about the foreign technology, which we can eventually use in our own country. So that is absolutely essential as well. This is the approach that we should have. And finally, I would conclude by saying our government is having a very good initiative. What we could also do is come up with the labels that I mentioned before. Okay, so with all of this, we are helping our country. This has nothing to do with whom you're supporting, whom you're pro, whom you're against. Nothing. This is pure economics. This is helping the country where you're living. This is to help raise the standard of living and helping the people in our country. So let us not use this video to gauge if someone is pro or anti. Doesn't matter. This is all of us, citizens of India, helping our country, helping our fellow citizens. So with that, all the best. I hope this made this information was useful. If there are more questions, you can always write to me or get in touch with me. So thank you very much. Be safe. Bye-bye.